When Harper Linwood reflected on the unraveling of her life, she later realized the warning signs had always been there, faint and scattered like crumbs she kept sweeping aside. She had trusted Adrian Vale from the beginning, trusted him with a sincerity that now felt humiliating in retrospect. He had been her calm, her safety net, the man who assured her that no matter how chaotic the world became, she always had him to anchor her. But anchors, she learned too late, can also pull you under. Harper had grown up with a small but steady circle of people she considered family, and at the center of that circle was her mother's lifelong best friend, Cassandra Doyle. Cassandra had been around since Harper was born and in every sense except blood. The woman who stood beside her mother at every holiday, every milestone, every disaster. Cassandra had a way of commanding attention without demanding it, floating into rooms with a confident grace that made people gravitate toward her. Harper admired her growing up, but as an adult, she sometimes found Cassandra's presence overwhelming, as if she were assessing everything she touched. Adrian had always been polite around Cassandra, but nothing more. At least, that's what Harper believed for the longest time. The first shift came quietly. Cassandra returned to town after spending months away handling her late sister's estate. Harper hadn't expected her to cling so tightly to Adrian upon her return, yet Cassandra seemed to enter their home with a familiarity that felt newly forced. She laughed a little too loudly at Adrian's jokes, asked him for help with trivial tasks, and placed her hand on his arm longer than necessary. Harper noticed, but she brushed it off, unwilling to sound jealous or insecure. Adrian reassured her that Cassandra was just lonely and reconnecting. Harper tried to believe him, but tension has a way of creeping in through the smallest cracks. Adrian began coming home later, claiming his workload had doubled. Cassandra started texting Harper less and Adrian more, offering him updates that made no sense for him to receive. Harper found his cologne lingering on his clothes on nights he said he had been alone in the office. She told herself coincidences weren't crimes, but coincidences that repeated themselves, those were patterns. It wasn't until one Saturday evening that Harper's heart finally stumbled over a truth she couldn't ignore. Her mother invited her over for a small dinner, insisting that Cassandra and Adrian would arrive later. Harper arrived early and overheard her mother fretting about Cassandra's sudden change in behavior, how distant she had become, how secretive. She mentioned Adrian in a way that made Harper uneasy, as if she suspected something but didn't dare say it aloud. Harper tried to shake it off. She didn't want her imagination to warp into paranoia. When Adrian never showed up to the dinner claiming a last-minute emergency, Harper felt that familiar sting of uncertainty twist deeper. She didn't say anything. Instead, she left early, needing air, needing space, needing something that didn't feel like a cage tightening around her ribs. The next day, she found a receipt in Adrian's jacket pocket from a boutique hotel on the edge of town, time-stamped with the exact night of the so-called emergency. Adrian brushed it off as a misunderstanding, insisting he had booked the room for a coworker in crisis. His explanation was smooth, the kind of polished story that suggested rehearsing. Harper felt numb. She didn't argue. She simply watched him, silently cataloging every flicker of discomfort he tried to hide. The final thread snapped when Harper stopped by her mother's house unannounced and recognized Adrian's car in the driveway of Cassandra's guest house next door. She parked down the street, pulse pounding, and watched the lights inside flicker as shadows moved past the windows. Every instinct in her body screamed the truth she didn't want to confront. Adrian wasn't working late. He wasn't helping coworkers. He wasn't trying to support Cassandra through grief. He was choosing Cassandra. He was betraying Harper with the woman who had practically helped raise her, the woman her mother trusted with everything. As Harper sat there gripping the steering wheel, she felt the world she knew shift in a way that would never shift back. She didn't have proof carved in stone yet, but she had enough to know her life was about to shatter. And once the truth fully surfaced, nothing and no one would remain untouched. The next morning, Harper woke with a heaviness that sat in her chest like a stone she couldn't dislodge. A numbness that blurred everything except the image of Adrian's car parked beside Cassandra's guest house. She moved through the house like a visitor, noting the subtle disorder of Adrian's belongings, the scent of his cologne lingering in the hallway, the way his coffee mug sat slightly askew as if he had rushed out again without looking back. She tried to confront him gently, asking where he had really been the night before, but he deflected with an ease that spoke of practice. He rambled about deadlines and client calls, piling excuses on top of each other until the conversation became a wall she couldn't break through. Harper watched him lie with the kind of precision that only comes from repetition, and she felt her stomach twist at the realization that this wasn't new behavior, she was only now noticing it. She spent the rest of the day gathering the fragmented pieces of her suspicion, replaying every moment that had led her here. There were times she swore she felt Cassandra watching her with unspoken pity, and times Adrian seemed to vanish emotionally even as he stood right beside her. Harper began scrolling through old messages, tracing timelines, pairing excuses with dates, noticing gaps where there should have been overlap. The evidence wasn't concrete, but it was forming a shape so ugly she couldn't pretend it was anything else. Unable to sit still, Harper drove to her mother's house again. She needed clarity, or maybe she simply needed someone to ground her in something honest. But as she approached, she saw Cassandra outside, speaking on the phone with a sly softness in her voice, her expression touched by a smile that wasn't meant for casual conversation. Harper stayed in her car, frozen as she watched Cassandra lean against the porch railing, tilting her head in a way Harper recognized from her own relationship with Adrian. It was intimate, familiar, practiced. And then Cassandra laughed, low and coy, a sound Harper had never heard from her before. The kind of laugh that didn't belong to an ant-like figure, but to a woman hiding a secret. Harper drove away before Cassandra could notice her. Her pulse hammered against her ribs, and an icy clarity settled in her mind. She needed proof, real proof, and she needed someone she could trust to help her get it. That person was her cousin Rowan, a man with a quiet intelligence and a talent for uncovering truths people tried to bury. Rowan's expression hardened when Harper told him everything. He didn't question her instincts. He didn't ask her to calm down or suggest she was overthinking. Instead, he started connecting dots with a strategic precision Harper didn't know she needed. Rowan pointed out patterns she missed, inconsistencies in Adrian's stories, and opportunities Cassandra would have had to manipulate herself deeper into their lives. He proposed a plan to confirm the truth. They would track Adrian's locations, cross-reference his alibis, and gather evidence without confronting him prematurely. Harper agreed, though her stomach churned at the thought of what they might find. Over the next few days, Harper watched her life split into two versions. The one she presented to Adrian, where she played along with his lies and maintained a calm front, and the one she shared with Rowan, where they pieced together the map of betrayal inch by inch. Every night, Adrian returned home slightly later than before, offering explanations that echoed the hollow rhythm of his previous excuses. He kissed Harper with a detachment she felt deep in her bones, and she pretended not to notice the faint traces of a floral perfume that wasn't hers. On the fourth night, Rowan texted Harper urgently. He had followed Adrian after work and tracked him straight to Cassandra's guest house. The message hit Harper like a physical blow. She didn't respond. Instead, she drove to a quiet overlook 2 neighborhoods away and sat there until the horizon blurred. She didn't cry. She simply let the truth expand until it filled every corner of her mind. Adrian wasn't just cheating. He was betraying her with someone who had been woven into her family her entire life. Someone who should have protected her, not destroyed her. And Harper realized something chilling in that moment. Whatever was happening between Adrian and Cassandra wasn't new. It was older, deeper, and far more devastating than she had allowed herself to even imagine. Harper spent the next day moving on autopilot, her mind trapped between disbelief and a rising determination that felt sharper than fear. She stayed silent while Adrian rushed through his morning routine, avoiding eye contact the way guilty people do when they sense the air shifting. He left with a promise to be home early, a promise Harper already knew he wouldn't keep. The moment the door clicked shut, she let herself breathe fully for the first time in hours. She wasn't going to confront him yet, not without Rowan's final confirmation, not without understanding how deep the betrayal truly went. She drove to Rowan's apartment, where he had spent half the night digging into Adrian's phone records, Cassandra's social media metadata, and whatever traces he could legally uncover. When he opened the door, his expression said more than words ever could. He handed her a folder containing locations, timestamps, and screenshots that formed a timeline far more devastating than Harper prepared for. Adrian hadn't just slipped into Cassandra's life recently. Their connection stretched back months. Before Cassandra's return from handling her sister's estate, there were gaps where Adrian claimed to be traveling for work that aligned perfectly with Cassandra's time away. There were unexplained charges on Adrian's bank statements from towns Cassandra had visited. Harper's chest tightened as she flipped through the evidence, each page another blow, another reminder that she had been living beside a stranger wearing Adrian's face. Rowan hesitated before handing her the final piece, a photo he took the night before from a distance. Grainy but unmistakable Adrian entering Cassandra's guest house with the familiarity of someone already being home. Harper stared at the image until her throat burned. Something inside her shifted, cracking open with a painful clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a choice, a deliberate, ongoing betrayal woven through months of lies and rehearsed affection. She thanked Rowan, though the word felt small compared to what she owed him, and returned home with the folder pressed tightly to her chest. She sat in the doorway for nearly 10 minutes before she could force herself inside. The house smelled like Adrian, like their shared life, like the future she thought they were building together. But now every object felt tainted. The framed vacation photo on the wall, the throw blanket they argued over, the mug he always used. Her hands trembled as she set the folder on the table. She wasn't a person who sought revenge, but she understood now that the truth alone wouldn't be enough. Adrian would deny everything, twist the details, weaponize her emotions until she doubted her own memory. Cassandra would hide behind her connection to Harper's mother, behind decades of trust Harper never thought to question. Simply confronting them would achieve nothing but giving them power over her pain. They needed to be exposed, fully, quietly, strategically, and Harper realized she had a weapon neither of them expected: her mother's upcoming birthday celebration. A large gathering Cassandra herself had insisted on helping organize. Dozens of family members and close friends would be there. People who trusted Cassandra, people who believed Adrian was devoted to Harper, people who would see the truth without any possibility of manipulation or denial. Harper didn't want drama. She didn't want spectacle. She wanted justice and she wanted witnesses. She began preparing in secret, gathering the evidence into a concise presentation she could reveal at the right moment. But even as she planned, she felt a deeper question clawing its way into her thoughts. If Adrian and Cassandra had been involved for this long, why return home every night? Why pretend loyalty? Why build a life with her at all? The answer arrived unexpectedly that same evening when Adrian came home earlier than usual, moving with a jittery tension she had never seen before. He avoided her eyes, pacing the kitchen, muttering about needing to make big decisions soon. Harper kept her expression neutral, but her pulse thundered. She sensed something shifting, some hidden truth pushing to the surface. When Adrian finally sat down across from her, he seemed on the verge of saying something monumental, something that made Harper brace herself in a way she couldn't explain. And for the first time, she realized there might be another secret beneath the affair, something darker, something that would turn every assumption she'd made into a lie she never saw coming. Adrian sat across from Harper with a stiffness that made the air feel electrically charged, as if he were balancing between confession and collapse. Harper kept her posture steady, her expression soft enough to hide the storm inside her, waiting for him to spill whatever truth had driven him home so early. He opened and closed his hands repeatedly, avoiding her gaze, speaking in vague fragments, about life changing, about needing space, about things becoming complicated. Harper listened closely, and beneath the surface of his rambling she recognized something new: fear, not guilt. Fear. It flickered across his face every time his phone vibrated, every time he glanced toward the window facing Cassandra's direction. Harper realized then that the affair wasn't the only secret binding them. Something else was happening, something neither of them wanted her to discover. She deliberately remained quiet, letting the silence pressure him. But before he could form a full sentence, his phone buzzed with a notification he couldn't ignore. He checked it, and all color drained from his face. Without offering an explanation, he stood abruptly, claimed he needed to run an errand, and bolted from the house as though staying another second would trap him. Harper didn't follow. him. Instead, she looked at the kitchen table where the folder of evidence lay. Now, more than ever, she sensed that the affair was only one piece of a much larger truth. That night, Rowan contacted her with something urgent. He had dug deeper into Cassandra's recent history, not just her movements, but her financial records, her calls, her online activity. Cassandra wasn't merely a grieving best friend returning home. She had been quietly liquidating assets, requesting large cash withdrawals, conducting private meetings in places known for discretion. Not paperwork. Rowan sent Harper a list of dates that lined up with Adrian's supposed work trips, and suddenly the picture sharpened. This wasn't a spontaneous affair fueled by emotion or loneliness. It was a partnership, one built on secrecy, money, and planning. Adrian wasn't just choosing Cassandra. He was tied to something she was orchestrating behind the scenes. Harper's heart thudded painfully as she considered the implications. Cassandra had always been persuasive, strategic, and dangerously charming. But Harper had never imagined she would manipulate her way into Harper's relationship and possibly Harper's life for reasons far beyond romance. The following morning, Harper acted on instinct. She went to her mother's house early, needing to understand what Cassandra had been telling her, whether she had noticed anything unusual. Her mother was distracted, worried, confessing that Cassandra had been distant and stressed, disappearing for hours and returning with flimsy explanations. Harper's stomach twisted when her mother added that Cassandra had mentioned wanting to secure her future, though she never explained what that meant. As Harper was leaving, she noticed something out of place near the guest house. Cassandra's car trunk was slightly open, and inside were boxes filled with documents, binders, and what looked like packed belongings, far more than someone would prepare for a simple move. Harper snapped a photo discreetly and sent it to Rowan. His response was instantaneous. Cassandra wasn't preparing to leave town quietly. She was preparing to disappear. And Adrian was part of it. Harper returned home, adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She was no longer heartbroken, she was furious, betrayed in a way that twisted deeper than cheating. Adrian came home later than usual, acting strangely calm, almost relieved. He moved around the house as if he were memorizing it for the last time, touching corners, glancing at items he had never cared about. He didn't notice Harper watching him, studying the way his eyes lingered on the door as though he were waiting for the right moment to walk out forever. Harper's plan for her mother's birthday gathering now felt even more urgent. If Cassandra and Adrian were planning to vanish, she needed to act before they slipped away and left her mother devastated, left her life in ruins, left justice unfinished. That night, Rowan arrived with something that made Harper's blood run cold, a recorded call between Cassandra and an unknown man discussing a transfer Adrian was supposed to finalize. One connected to funds Harper didn't even know Adrian had access to. Cassandra wasn't just using Adrian for affection, she was using him as a pawn in something that bordered on criminal. And Adrian, whether willingly or blindly, was following her lead. Harper realized she was standing at the edge of a truth more explosive than betrayal. The affair had been the smokescreen. The real devastation was still hidden beneath it. And tomorrow, with the entire family gathered, she would have one chance to drag every secret into the light before they disappeared for good. She just didn't know yet that the revelation waiting for her would change everything she believed about Adrian and everything she thought she knew about Cassandra. The morning of her mother's birthday celebration arrived with a tension so heavy Harper felt it settle in her bones. She barely slept, replaying the web of deceit Rowan had exposed, the documents in Cassandra's trunk, the recorded call mentioning Adrian's involvement in something far darker than an affair. The betrayal had evolved from emotional devastation into a looming threat, one that could entangle her entire family if she didn't act swiftly. Harper dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that reflected calm control, though her insides twisted with dread. She rehearsed her plan again and again, wait until everyone arrived, gather attention subtly, and present the evidence in a way that left no room for denial. She didn't want a dramatic scene. She wanted truth. But truth has a way of creating drama whether you ask for it or not. Rowan arrived early, handling the technical preparation, ensuring the file compilation was ready on a single drive. He warned her that once everything came out, Adrian and Cassandra might react unpredictably. Harper simply nodded. The time for fear had long passed. By late afternoon, the house filled with warmth and chatter. Family members brought dishes, gifts, and laughter that made the cellar of betrayal beneath it all feel surreal. Harper's mother was glowing, oblivious to the seismic shift about to hit her world. Cassandra arrived fashionably late, wearing an elegant dress that made her look composed and unbothered. Adrian arrived minutes later, slipping into the room with forced charm, greeting Harper with a kiss on the cheek that made her skin crawl. Harper watched them interact, noticing details she'd ignored before: the way Cassandra positioned herself near Adrian, the shared glances, the silent communication steeped in a secret alliance. When the moment finally came, Harper stood in the center of the living room and cleared her throat. Conversations faded. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Her mother's warm smile instantly calmed her enough to speak. What she didn't expect was Adrian stepping forward first, announcing that he had something important to share. Harper froze. He hadn't planned this. She knew because she had watched him all morning, anxious, pacing, glancing at his phone. Now he stood with an eerie resolve, eyes shifting between Harper, Cassandra, and the crowd. He started speaking about change, about making hard decisions, about moving into the next chapter. He claimed he had been unhappy for a long time and had found clarity with someone who understood him better. Harper felt the room shrink into a suffocating bubble as he openly declared that he was leaving emotionally, physically, entirely. He hesitated only once before his eyes settled on Cassandra. The room erupted into murmurs. Harper's mother staggered back, one hand pressed to her chest. For a brief moment, Cassandra appeared startled, as though she hadn't expected Adrian to announce their relationship so bluntly. But then Cassandra straightened, smoothing her expression into a poised facade, preparing to own the revelation. Harper didn't allow it. Before Cassandra could speak, she lifted Rowan's drive, connected it to the TV, and began playing the files Rowan had compiled. The room fell silent as timestamps, screenshots, financial transfers, location data, and finally the recorded call filled the air. It wasn't just an affair. It was manipulation, financial misconduct, plans to relocate under falsified pretenses, binders ready to transport, assets quietly moved. A scheme Cassandra had orchestrated with Adrian acting as her convenient accomplice. Gasps echoed across the room. Cassandra's mask cracked for the first time. Adrian's face turned ashen. Harper's mother stared in horror, tears gathering in her eyes not just because of betrayal, but because the person she trusted most outside her family had been weaponizing that trust. Cassandra tried to argue, to spin it, but it was useless. Every detail was verified, every lie documented. Her mother's voice trembled as she told Cassandra to leave her home immediately. Adrian attempted to defend himself, insisting he had been manipulated, that he hadn't understood the severity of what Cassandra was planning. But Harper could see the truth in his eyes. He hadn't cared until he was caught. When he tried to approach her, she stepped back, feeling nothing but relief. The man she once loved was a stranger. By the time the police arrived, called by Rowan due to the financial irregularities, Cassandra was red with fury, Adrian pale with shock, and Harper's mother silently shattered. Days later, after the dust settled, Harper stepped into a life that felt unfamiliar but honest. She stayed close to her mother, helped Rowan document anything authorities needed, and slowly rebuilt the version of herself that had been smothered under months of lies. She realized something profound. Betrayal can break you, but truth can free you. And though she would carry scars from what Adrian and Cassandra had done, she also carried the strength of knowing she confronted the darkness head-on and survived it. For the first time in months, she looked at her reflection and saw a woman who refused to be played, manipulated, or dimmed ever again.